basically what I'm going to do is take everyone through some important points that I learned during times in my life where significant fear was apparent. 3 short stories of those times and how each may relate to you. I'll get into mindset, your comfort zone, and the importance of the nervous system and having a healthy one, and tools that you can use to healthily and effectively grow into the person that you were born to be. We are born with 2 fears, okay? Falling and loud noises. That's it. Everything else is learned. And the beauty about that is that because we now know that the brain is plastic, we can unlearn the things that do not serve us and then relearn productive drivers to replace those other things, or use current drivers and switch what they mean to you, in this case, fear. Because we're definitely not stuck with the genetics or personality traits where we once may have thought we were. And how do I know this to be true? Well, there are at least 3 times in my life where I had immense fear. But because I took the scary steps anyway, I grew and I learned from those experiences, making me a more accomplished person and one with less fear and more drive. But, and it is a very big but, there are a few things that I didn't know back then while all this was happening in my life that when I think about it now, I didn't know what I didn't know, and it is what it is. I have absolutely no regrets. But they are things that I know now that are an invaluable piece of information. And this is what they are. So firstly, your traumas, conditioning, and life experiences create your belief systems and in turn your reality. So that's pretty huge. I can show you how to change regardless of these things if you want to, of course. 2, your nervous system needs to be healthy and flexible for you to be able to create any permanent change in your life. So that's a really big one, and I'll delve more into that a little bit later. 3, you can reframe the way that you look at fear so that it helps and supports your advancement instead of hindering it. Mind blown, amazing. And 4, to grow, you need to get out of your comfort zone, but in a healthy way. And I'll also dive into that in a bit. So your values will always outweigh the consequences, hopefully, okay? Even if you know that the consequences will be seemingly bad. For example, I know personally as an entrepreneur that there were times that I invested in programs that I knew where I was going to break the bank, but I just knew that I had to do it because the result on the other side of that, of completing that course, would make me more money or make me smarter, or because I would have the knowledge or whatever it was to increase my business. So it was an investment and it was worth it. In your heart of hearts, you know what you love, what you need, what is right for you. And this may not be right for others for many different reasons. So conditioning, religion, in my case, beliefs, etc. And you may be condemned to some extent for it, but you are the only person that needs to live with your decision, okay? So do what puts a fire in your belly and what makes you happy, and the rest will follow. Let me tell you a little story. So I grew up in a particular denomination. I'm not going to specify what that is, but I grew up in a particular denomination of church with my parents, and it was a Spanish-speaking church in Perth. And I was born into it, and I got to about 16 years of age, and I wanted a change. I wanted to go to an English-speaking church because, you know, my parents are Spanish. I grew up speaking Spanish at home all my life, even though I went to school at English schools. And I just wanted something different. I wanted to change, make new friends. And there was an English-speaking church near where we lived. So I told my parents I was going to go there instead. My parents kept going to the Spanish church, and then I changed to the English church. So I made friends right away. Always been pretty good at doing that. And one of those friends ended up being my first love. Let's call her Lucy. Lucy and I became very close very quickly, and soon enough we were declaring our undying love for each other. And the only problem was that Lucy was very much a true believer of the church. And even though we would fool around, that kind of stuff, she wouldn't go all the way with me. Okay, that was too far for her because she believed what we were taught wholeheartedly, that what we were doing was wrong. There's some huge conditioning right there. Even though she loved me, she just couldn't go that far. Okay. Now, at this point of my life, hormones were absolutely raging. And even though I loved Lucy with all my heart, I, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your own personal filter, I found someone who would go all the way with me. As soon as it happened, I felt horrible. But I knew deep down, despite all of it, I knew I was still a good person, and I wanted to prove that. So I went to Lucy and I told her what I had done. Lucy was obviously devastated, and in her pain, she gave me an ultimatum. She said that if I didn't go to the elders of the church and tell them what I had done, that she would. Whew. Okay, so my heart sank and then it tried to jump out of my throat. Mind racing, I was sweating, but I was freezing, knowing what this might possibly mean for me. Again, I wanted to do the right thing. I knew I was a good person. So I decided to go to the elders of the church myself to confess. After the next church meeting, I went up to one of the elders and I told him very boldly that I had something to tell him. The meeting with the elders was set. I was to meet them outside of church hours at the church to confess. I remember on the day, parked my car in the car park, and I walked up to the large church doors. And I just stood there. Now you got to understand, this was a big fucking deal, right? My heart pounding out of my chest. I know this is going to be a huge pivotal moment in my life, one that would create a new path for me and potentially completely obliterate the one that I was on. I am so scared, but this wave of courage just washes over me. Shaking, I raise my chin up high and I walk in. The elders are sitting at a large table waiting for me. I walk up slowly, not looking at their faces. There's also a whole bunch of shame attached here. I'm terrified. I pull back the chair that was there for me, opposite to them at the table, and I sit down. So what did you want to talk to us today, Ruth, about? I can feel my heart. It's thumping so hard and fast, I swear they can hear it too. I swallow, or at least I try to, because my mouth is so freaking dry. There's a glass of water in front of me. Is this for me? I ask. One of the elders nods. And I'm taking some big gulps of this water, hoping that it's going to quench my fear as well as my thirst, but alas, it does not. I take another gulp. I put the glass down and I take a big, deep breath in. I don't. I go into as little detail as possible because I don't want to talk about my private life with two highly religious middle-aged men, but here we are. Unfortunately, they ask me questions, not for intimate detail, but for more information so that they know who did what, who to punish, and how. Now, because of this situation, I had learned that I was a sinner, and that confessing to the elders of the church could have potentially dire consequences. This is what made part of my reality. What I had learned from being in the church since birth, but my values of being true to myself outweighed the consequences that I knew I was going to experience. But that's just my story. For some of you, it could be about leaving your high-paying job to do something you truly love, or start a podcast, or a workshop, or leave to travel for a year. And the thing that's stopping you, your butts, is the fear of not having income for a while, or not having another job to fall back on, or what your family and friends are going to think of you. What's your but? What is the fear that you have learned? Our buts, I want to leave my high-paying job to do an arts degree, but everyone is going to think I'm crazy because I won't have all the money coming in anymore. And what jobs can you get with an art degree anyway? Or I want to start a podcast about how knitting is good for your health, but who's going to listen to that? I'll be a laughingstock. Our buts are because we may not think we are capable, and we think that we're going to fail. Let me tell you something. You are always capable of so much more than you think you are. Even if it feels like the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest in thongs, t-shirts, shorts, and no rope, because it can feel that way sometimes. I'll say it again because I really want it to land for you. You are always more capable of so much more than what you think you are. And I ask you this, at what point do you actually fail anyway? Fear will stop a lot of us a lot of the time from taking leaps of faith, scary steps, because the lack of knowledge. You've never done that thing before. So it prevents us from knowing we can actually give it a go, and also to be okay with not getting the result we wanted. But is that failure? Not if you take the lesson from that supposed failure. The only time anyone anywhere fails, truly fails, is when they give up or when they die. I'll let you in on a little secret. If you're failing, you're learning. And if you're learning, you're winning. And if you're winning, you're winning. So really, you can't fuck it up. It's the getting up every time, dusting yourself off, and giving it a go with your newly acquired knowledge. That is where growth comes from. So instead of calling it failure, I'm going to call it lessons from now on. And you should too. Here's another little snippet of my life, my super exciting life. So my parents left Perth to live in Spain when I was 17. I'll get into why a little bit later. So I was free to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. It was amazing. So I did. I was the singer in bands, living the rock and roll lifestyle, quite literally. I loved it. I thought it was awesome. I had girlfriends and I thought it was so cool. The only problem was that that kind of lifestyle isn't sustainable. It was fun for a while, but there came a time where the emptiness and the pain from my past that I was trying to hide with parties, drugs, and alcohol wouldn't stay hidden anymore. No matter how much fun I was having, that feeling kept creeping up out of the shadows and into the light where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. I always knew that I was meant for something bigger, better than what I was experiencing. There was a deep knowing of that. And at this point in my life, I had little to no self-worth. I didn't think I could achieve anything. Didn't think I was good for anything. This was where my belief system had sunk to. But this feeling of me being meant for something more wouldn't go away. I had to do something. But what and how? Then it comes to me. To make a drastic change, to completely flip my current situation, I had to do something drastic that I'd never done before. And to take that task on, I had to take on that familiar feeling of courage. Just like when I stood outside those large church doors. So one day, I'm scrolling through Facebook. This is about 10 years ago now. And a video ad for Tough Mudder comes up. I stopped scrolling and I looked at it and I couldn't stop looking at it. And the weirdest thing was happening. I was getting emotional looking at it. I'm looking at people running through mud, jumping over things, and tears are running down my face. But I got it. This was the thing that I needed to do. This was the drastic thing. And drastic because to some of you may not sound like much, okay? But to me, back then, to give you some context, I would be coming home from a late night of partying, so the sun would be coming up. I'd be a little worse for wear, and I'd see a jogger doing their thing, or a runner, jogging, running, both same, right? And I would look at them and would be absolutely perplexed as to why people would get up early out of their warm, comfortable, snuggly bed to jog or to run. To say I was unfit was an understatement. But I bought the ticket. The race was going to take place 1 year from when I bought it. Now that I gave myself no option but to do this thing, I spent the money and I was determined to make it stick, to change my life for the better. I started going down to a local park by myself and doing a workout almost every day. I slowly started to get fitter and stronger and feeling great. It was 6 months in and I got to the point where going to the park by myself just wasn't cutting it anymore. I was plateauing, yeah? So a friend had told me about one of his friends that just started a CrossFit gym out of their garage. Sold. I almost died. It was the first CrossFit session I did, but I was hooked. After a few months, I was a new person, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I wanted to share this feeling of elation and the secret to happiness with as many people as possible, because no one had heard of the benefits of fitness before I came along, apparently. So this is where I started studying to become a personal trainer. And it was only a few months later when the Tough Mudder event was finally going to happen. Now, if you don't know, Tough Mudder is a 20-kilometer obstacle course with 30 obstacles. You're allowed to skip obstacles if you want to, but I had decided to really complete and smash my goal. I had to do all of them, no matter how scary. And this is how I would do it, right? This is how I would let myself know that I could achieve things that, I put my mind to. So from running through electrically charged wires and getting zapped to jumping from a decent height into water, I'm scared of heights as well, I did them all. Just reminding you that I'd never run a K in my life. I did it. And it was the best feeling in the whole fucking world, crossing that finish line. I got to tell you, I was emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted. My body was aching from the electrical zaps, but I did it. I bloody did it. Did you know that using fear as a driver creates new neuron transmitters and pathways in the frontal lobe that inspire greatness? Yep, It's true. Here's the science. So when fear kicks in, it comes from the reptilian part of the brain. And when it happens, it turns off the problem-solving part of the brain. It's at the front. But if you take action in direct opposition to the fear, it starts to reprogram our brain. Neuron transmitters, are created and built within our brain, turning off the fear in the reptilian part of the brain and creating new pathways to fire off in the frontal lobe. And when our frontal lobe fires off, this is where we're able to do great things. Yes, that course is a lot of money for you to know how to create a business from the ground up, but is it going to get you one step further into reaching your dream of starting your business? It's scary, it's a risk, but it is a risk worth taking because it will get you to take another step closer to starting so you can make money and quit that office job you don't like, maybe, whatever it is. And also by doing that, you're rewiring your brain. Because I can guarantee you something. It's not even just you winning by getting a lesson if you don't get the result you want, fail. It's you now rewiring your brain to level up. You are now not the same person you were a few minutes ago. You're already a better version just by making the decision to do the thing, whatever it is. Doing the hard thing generally leads to the best results, rewards, and ultimate growth. Challenges are the most rewarding when faced head-on and experienced. It is the same with facing pain. Going through it allows for healing. That is where the biggest lessons lie. But there needs to be a healthy nervous system in place for this to be done effectively and without causing too much stress. I'll get into what that looks like after I tell you one last story. So one of my last big hurdles, and I'm sure it's not the last in my life, I'm sure I'll have plenty more to come. But the last one that I had, a significant one, was the relationship I had with my father. He was an angry man, quick to temper, didn't show affection, what you'd imagine someone that lived a hard life would be like. That was my dad. I was scared of him when I was a child. And then as I got older, I became brazen with him. He stopped using his belt to reprimand me when I turned into a young woman. So lucky me. So I would answer back, argue, and rebel against him. I felt like he loved me, but he didn't like me. And there was a time where I hated the man. And yes, I know how strong a word that is. After a few years passed of my parents leaving for Spain to live, I took a trip to Portugal to see my family on my dad's side. And when one of my aunties told me a story of how my dad's dad, my granddad, had died right in front of my dad in a work accident when my dad was only 13 years old. My dad had to then assume responsibility for a family of 8 children as he was the oldest. So he had to leave school and go to work to provide for the family. I was in my mid-20s when I first heard this story, and it put things into perspective for me. It didn't explain why he had to be an arsehole all my life, but I had an understanding of why he may have held on to so much anger and resentment. He probably thought the world was against him. Years later, I'm in my mid-30s. My parents kept trying to get me to visit them again. And this was a time where it all felt like it'd come to a head for me regarding the relationship I had with my parents. I didn't want to go because if it was like any of the other 4 times I'd been to visit them, a special kind of hell for me. I just didn't want to do that to myself again. So instead, I decided to finally write them a letter, letting them know exactly how it was for me growing up with them and how it made me feel, what kind of trauma it caused, and the results of me now as an adult towards myself, with relationships with other people. I didn't spare them any details. I was firm but fair, and most importantly, truthful. It was time that I finally spoke up. I never had before. And it obviously did the trick because they stopped harassing me about going to Spain to visit them. Until I received a phone call in April last year. It was my mum letting me know that Dad was in hospice. He had contracted pleurisy, and he wasn't fighting it. And doctors didn't know how long he had left. She said that I should go to Spain to say goodbye to him. Now, what I'm going to say next may sound harsh and unthinkable to some of you with amazing or even just good parental relationships. My dad was old, and he had been old for a while. And for the sake of the hell my mum lived under, and for the sake of any grip he still had over me, and even so that he could get some relief, I was waiting for him to die. I wanted him to die so that we could all have some peace. So when she called to tell me this, I wasn't sad. It almost felt like a business transaction. So like, okay, this is the next logical step for all of us. I debated for quite a while about whether I should go. I didn't like the man, and I'd been waiting for this, so why would I? On the flip side, he was my dad still, and I did love him despite everything. And what if after not going and him dying, I would then later regret it? Not today, daddy boy. So I decided to go. I almost didn't recognize him when I first saw him. My dad, he was always a tall, strong, well-built guy, tanned, big beer belly. And when I saw him laying in that bed in the hospice, I didn't recognize him. He was now reduced to pale skin and bones, literally, with no spirit. They had him on so much morphine for the pain that he didn't recognize me for the first few minutes. And then he looked over again, and you see the light switch on in his eyes, and his eyes widen in surprise and recognition. Oh, my daughter, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. There is a quote by Ram Dass where he says he revels sitting next to someone who is about to transition on to the next life, because he gets to witness them in their absolute truth. Isn't it interesting that it takes death, or the knowledge that death is around the corner, for someone to finally come to that point, to their truth? Now, he wasn't talking before that because of all the liquid in his lungs from the pleurisy. It was difficult and painful for him to say anything. He would say a single word to communicate, and then only when he really needed to. So needless to say, when he spoke those words to me, I broke down. After so many years of abuse, trauma, and pain, this didn't take all that away, but it was enough for both me and for him to put it to rest and move on. So you've finally taken that scary step. You've quit the job, started the course, booked the plane ticket. What are you feeling? Is it fear? Sure, maybe a little, but what is it mostly? How can you rethink this feeling? Did you know that fear has the exact same physiological response as excitement? It is simply a matter of reframing what you're feeling. Is it fear? No, it's excitement. So here's the thing about mindset. I'm going to draw it over here. I'd like to have space for all my little drawings. Okay, so here is your mindset. That top bit, that's your consciousness. That's your, your conscious brain. Okay, and that makes up 5% of what's actually happening. The rest, all this part, is your subconscious. Okay, and that is the driver for most things that you do. So you know when you hop into a car and you get to wherever you were headed and you try and think about the trip that you just had in the car while you were driving and you're like, don't remember what just happened. Autopilot, subconscious, okay? Here is where your beliefs are, all your trauma, your patterns of behavior, your skill sets, and your memories. You know when you're walking through a shopping center and you walk past someone and they're wearing a perfume or an aftershave and it sets off a trigger, a memory, it takes you right back to that place and time and space. Subconscious. So your traumas and in turn your belief systems, because your traumas become your belief systems and then in turn your values, they become your reality. Anything you do on autopilot comes from your subconscious, which in turn come from your past traumas, which in turn create your belief system and your values. So for example, if you've had bad experiences with men in your life, right? You could have the belief that all men are assholes. I've heard that plenty of times. Now, if you start to become conscious of what this belief is and where it comes from, where it started, you could begin to see that this belief may be a little flawed. You can then open yourself up to the possibility of another reality, one where most men are beautiful people that just want to shower you with love. And I can guarantee you will start to see something else coming into your personal filter of the world. And this can be done with emotionally charged repetition. I'll talk about that in a bit. Get out of your comfort zone. It's all well and good to say that, and I'm sure we've all heard that. It's we hear that a lot in the personal development world. But if you're not doing it in a constructive and healthy way, you're just going to create more stress in your world and potential re-traumatization, which can affect you obviously in a negative way. So here's what that looks like. Draw it over here. Okay. That is your comfort zone. AKA the death zone. Why? Because that is where all your hopes and dreams go to die. Okay, outside of the comfort zone, we have the growth zone. This is where you can stretch yourself to grow. But outside of that, is the survival mode zone, which is a bit of a danger zone. Okay, so anything you need to make a stretch for does not come about in this space, which is the comfort zone. Okay, the body is hardwired to stay in what's familiar because what is familiar is safe. If you want to build a business or quit your job to do something you love or start a podcast or travel the world for a year, it just won't happen here at all. Okay. In here though, you are learning new things, but you haven't jacked your nervous system into survival mode, which is this last guy. This is where you're really stressed, health is failing, you can't make a decision in this place, not good ones anyway. You can grow your growth zone though. So make a stretch into your growth zone, you start a course, okay? You put the money in, start a course. Then stretch yourself a little more. You get your ABN for your business. You stretch yourself a little more. You actually start advertising your new business, okay? Eventually, you can grow that growth zone, okay? And you can start making bigger and more and bolder steps, okay? Because you have stretched yourself. Where this is not really an issue anymore. Unless, you know, there's a literal tiger that's running after you. Then you go into survival mode. So, this is all well and good knowing this stuff, okay? But this can only happen if you have a healthy nervous system. Let me draw you another picture. So this here is your window of tolerance, okay? This one is nice and wide, it's flexible, it's healthy, okay? This is where you want to be at, all right? If you have, for example, an incident at work with a co-worker or an argument with your partner, that's the argument. Your sympathetic nervous system will turn on. That's what charges you up, right? Incident happens, you're charged, and then your parasympathetic nervous system switches on to bring you back down to a base level. Now, if you've had some trauma in your life, that window of tolerance has now shrunk, okay? Where that same incident with a coworker or fight with your partner will come outside the window of tolerance, triggering you, okay? This is where impatience comes in. It's where you're like, you yell, you scream, you get really anxious, whatever it is, okay? Okay, get charged up. You're up here outside the window of tolerance. You're super anxious, super angry, and then your PNS, parasympathetic nervous system, switches on, but it goes past the window of tolerance once again into, which could be, for some, a freeze response. Okay, so everything locks up. It's not a good place to be. All right. Now these guys, this is a super small window of tolerance. It's people with PTSD, okay? And they are constantly triggered, constantly into freeze every day. That is what people with PTSD experience, all right? So ideally, this is where we want to be. So when you're in fight or flight, which is up here, okay? So many things are going on in the body. The immune system is compromised. The digestive system doesn't process food properly. When you're in fight or flight, your field of vision is very narrow, okay? There's no time to be creative. You can't, you don't feel like painting a picture or writing or something, doing something lovely like that. Because your body is trying to figure out how to survive a threat of, in the past, running from a tiger, or in our modern day world, running after the kids, stresses at work, issues with partners, all the stimulus that we get bombarded with on a daily basis. Providing that you're doing work on your nervous system, like meditation, trauma release work, hypnotherapy, any kind of body work or energy healing. This is where the growth zone starts to widen, okay? And life becomes an adventure, exciting, instead of threatening, fear, okay? And another awesome thing that happens is that you're able to get into your creative space a lot easier. And what you're striving for is fun. Instead of scary, it's a play zone. It's an adventure. It's a place for you to create and enjoy the process. I spent years of my life, my young life, I'm still young, what am I talking about? Drowning out and distracting myself from the pain that I was harboring from old traumas. Remember that when I told you that time where I went to meet the elders of the church to let them know what I'd done, and I was standing outside those big church doors, sweating, heart pounding out of my chest, scared out of my mind? That was one of the hardest moments of my life, because I knew that what I was doing would potentially be detrimental to my current life. And I was right. I ended up being kicked out of the church, and everyone I knew and loved stopped talking to me, because that's the deal when you're kicked out from this particular church. And my parents left for Spain because they wouldn't be a witness to my new lifestyle choices, that of being gay. But it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Do you know what happened when I finally thought, maybe it's time to work through some of the shit that had obviously affected who I am as a person, my relationships, my everyday, and the way I feel when I wake up in the morning. I started to sit with the old pain instead of running away from it. I would allow myself to feel everything, no matter how gut-wrenching, how incredibly difficult and agonizing it was. I would just sit, or a lot of the times lay on the floor with it until it would subside. And it would always subside. And do you know what happened when I did that time and time again? I felt lighter. I felt as though something had shifted within me, and certain things that would trigger me before would be less. They wouldn't trigger me as much. That told me that running away from the pain and hurt and trauma all those years, because it was too much for me to deal with, made my life more difficult, not easier. And here I thought I was beating the system. Instead, I was making it so much harder for myself. And just to be clear, I was stretching myself within my growth zone, maybe going into the survival mode a little, but I could handle it. For some people, if they haven't done the work on their nervous system, it could be re-traumatizing. So it's a matter of knowing where you're at, knowing how much you can stretch yourself, and maybe doing some work with a coach of some kind, or some sort of healer, or like energy work or hypnotism or meditation, like that sort of stuff I mentioned before. So like I just said, meditation is key here. Meditation lowers your brain waves. It's basically a relaxation of the conscious mind to a point where you are in a hypnotized state. And this is what allows you to heal your nervous system. Your window of tolerance can widen in this place if you do it enough regularly and consistently. This can also be done with trauma release work, hypnotherapy, any kind of body work, or energy healing, like I mentioned before. So it makes the window of tolerance wider, healthier, and more flexible. So you'll be able to deal with everyday stresses with more ease. And this is also where you can access your subconscious mind to reprogram it. And a way that you can do this is by repetition of new thoughts and beliefs with an emotion attached to it. So this is another way to create new patterns of behavior, new ways of looking at the world, and creating a new reality for yourself. The mind cannot differentiate between what is really happening and what is visualization. So if you couple that visualization with emotion, for example, how completing that course will make you feel, or quitting the job to pursue your dream of opening a cake shop will make you feel, or finishing that book you always wanted to write, how that would make you feel. If you attach the emotion along with the visualization, whatever it is, and practice this as often as possible, I promise you can watch your life change before your very eyes, okay? You'll notice unexpected things just start falling into place. And that includes reframing what fear means whenever it comes up for you. So when you notice it, acknowledge the feeling and then reframe it. This feeling I'm feeling right now is a feeling of excitement. I'm so excited. You keep saying it over and over again. Repetition is key. And you may not believe what you're saying at first, but over time, I promise you, you will. I use the same technique myself. You will eventually reprogram your brain to recognize that feeling is the feeling of excitement instead of fear. Because remember, fear has the same physiological response as excitement. And you will act accordingly. Another thing, become conscious of your beliefs. When you start to think, why did I just get triggered by that? What is the story there? Where did it come from? When did it start? Then you stop, you be quiet, and you listen. This is where meditation comes in. You have all the answers to all your questions inside of you. You just need to be still for long enough to be able to hear them. And then once you get the answer, you ask yourself, how can I change this belief into something that serves me? Again, you stop and listen to that answer, and away you go. I know I'm making it sound really easy. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy, okay? It's simple, but it's not easy. The idea is simple, but it takes a lot of repetition. It takes time for you to develop meditation to get the results. Okay, it's not a quick fix. It's definitely not a quick fix, but it definitely works. I've used it. It's incredible. Meditation is probably one of the biggest things I will always recommend to people to do. And there's all sorts of different types of meditation as well. You don't have to sit cross-legged, close your eyes and, like these ones. You don't. You can go out for a walk in nature, listen to guided meditations where you can just go along with whatever, some soothing voice is telling you to do. And it's so simple. You can listen to frequency music, which is something that I do a lot as well, along with other practices of meditation. You can, I'm going on a tangent now because it's something I love to talk about. But seriously, there's so many ways to do it. There's really no excuse for you not to meditate. And another huge thing, okay, is to be aware of what you are consuming every day. And I'm not just talking about healthy food. Healthy food, yes, absolutely. But if we're going holistic here, I'm also talking about the movies you're watching, what music you're listening to, what social media you're following, who your friends are. That's a huge one. Who are you hanging out with often? Are they a positive influence on you? Do they push you to be a better version of yourself? Or do they keep you down on their level so as not to lose you? Because that's herd mentality. Okay? We actually go into a hypnosis state when we watch movies and shows and news, etc. So make sure that we consume things that are of the highest vibration and the highest good for you. How much news do you consume and do you let it get to you? It's all good to keep up with what's going on with the world, but it can literally re-traumatize you. Ideally, you want to be able to rise above everything that's going on to be able to change it. And here's a bonus tip. When deciding what to do for you, who to listen to, what to consume, what to eat, whatever it is, ask your body what it wants, or if it wants that thing. If you stop to listen, you will start to notice if you feel light or if you feel heavy and gross, and maybe you'll start to feel some sort of ache in your belly or whatever it is. Your body is intelligent and it's super intuitive. When you start tuning in, you'll start to feel what it wants and what it doesn't want. So looking at re-examining your values and beliefs, gently pushing yourself to grow and healing, when you can do that and adopt this mindset, which is you are so much more powerful than you know. You have the knowledge of what you can do to make changes in your life that can bring forth that queen that lays waiting within each one of us. The more people that know about this information that I've just shared with you, especially about the nervous system, this stuff's huge. There will be a far greater amount of healthy people with incredible personal growth, spreading their light and passions out into the world with less stress, more calm and centeredness, which in turn will make for a more beautiful humanity. One that is great for not just the person doing the growing, but for everyone. It's all about creating higher vibrations within each and every one of us that have a flow-on ripple effect. It starts with you. Spread the word. If you want to work with me, I do frequency work, energy healing. I do Reiki as well. I'm also a personal trainer, and I can incorporate all that stuff together for a more holistic growth and healing. Please contact me or follow me. I am at the Oracle of Ruth, all one word, on Instagram. I have a podcast at TuneIn Radio_U, which is a spiritual podcast, and it's all about, I interview amazing people from around the world, healers, teachers of all kinds, that have incredible information for you to grow and to heal and to be better versions of yourself. You can also follow me on Facebook. My business page is The Oracle of Ruth. Once again, if you go facebook.com/The Oracle of Ruth, the title of the business page is actually Mind Over Matter Wellness. Confusing, I know. Yeah, or email me at ultimatemindfit@gmail.com. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to get some feedback on what you thought on this presentation I just did. And yeah, one last thing. I do frequency minded meditation sessions, so group sonic meditation sessions using sonic frequency music. I hold those once a month. They are created by a guy called Ian Morris. His company is called Listening to Smile, and he creates incredible, beautiful frequency music that literally goes in and energetically heals whatever is going on for you. And he also takes the astrological happenings of the month. He brings out, that's why it's a monthly thing, he brings out a new album every month, and takes the astrological happenings of the month, uses the frequencies that from those astrological happenings. So for example, if Mercury is in retrograde, he'll use the frequency of Mercury in a song, in one of the songs in that album. And it is just, look, people that attend just cannot stop raving about how incredible the sessions are, and the after effects that they get from these. That's like a more peace, a sense of calm, less noise in their head. So, and it's ongoing. It's not just a one-day thing or the next day. These results just last. They're just incredible. So follow me on all that stuff that I just told you about. And yeah, if you have got any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, I hope this really helped you.